Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wicked Encounters, where we explore just what goes bump in the night. I'm your host, Allie, and it's every horror nut's favorite time of the year, October. In celebration of the spookiest month, I've compiled a list of movies that I think are worth sharing with you guys, and I'm calling it the 31 Days of Wicked Horror. We're on the 5th day of October now, but in case it's your first time checking in, I'll let you know how I've selected these movies that I believe are worthy enough for you to watch. First off, none of the movies are going to be older than 20 years, so we can add some newer videos to our must-watch list instead of continuing to repeat the same ones from 50 years ago. Sup, Addams family. Secondly, I'll be providing the synopsis and plot of the movies for those who may not like surprises or just want to listen to know what the movies are about. There will be a slide letting you know when we're coming up on it, and I'll let you know where it's safe to click on to avoid spoilers. Also, while many of the movies are streamable, I'm not going to really provide the info on where you can watch them, because it varies based on where you live, and also streaming services love removing and adding movies like there's no tomorrow. One minute Hulu has all of the good movies, next thing you know, it's got nothing but Family Guy. Finally, I'm going to give you some reasons as to why the movie stands out and why I think you'll like it. So, 5th on our list is It Follows. It Follows is a 2014 psychological horror film written and directed by David Robert Mitchell and produced by Northern Lights Films, Animal Kingdom, and Two Flints. The movie revolves around a supernatural entity that relentlessly stalks its victims. The entity is passed from person to person through sexual intercourse, creating a disturbing metaphor for fear, anxiety, and the dangers of intimacy. I'm going to go more in depth now and go over the plot of the movie, so if you'd like to skip, you'll know where to skip to in 3, 2, 1. The film begins with a mysterious and unsettling scene. A young woman, Annie, flees from her home in a panic. She seems terrified, but refuses to explain what is chasing her. Annie drives to a remote beach and leaves a tearful message for her parents, apologizing for her actions. The next morning, her mutilated body is found on the shore, her legs grotesquely broken backward, setting the tone for the film's pervasive dread. The story then shifts to the protagonist, Jay Height, a 19-year-old college student living in a suburban Detroit neighborhood. Jay is dating a young man named Hugh, and they go on a few dates. During one of these dates, Hugh seems paranoid and distracted, constantly looking around as if expecting someone to appear. At a movie theater, Hugh sees a woman who Jay cannot, causing him to abruptly leave the theater. Despite Hugh's strange behavior, Jay continues to see him, and they eventually have sex in his car. Afterward, Hugh incapacitates Jay with chloroform. When she wakes up, she finds herself tied to a wheelchair in an abandoned building. Hugh, now visibly distressed, explains the horrifying situation to Jay. He has passed on a curse to her, a malevolent entity that will now follow her until she either passes it on to someone else through sex, or is killed by it. The entity can take the appearance of anyone, sometimes a stranger, other times someone familiar, and it will always move slowly but unstoppably towards its victim. No matter where Jay goes, the entity will find her. If it catches and kills her, it will revert to chasing the previous person in the chain, meaning Hugh would be next if Jay dies. To prove his point, Hugh shows Jay the entity, which takes the form of a naked woman slowly walking towards them. He warns her to always stay on the move and never let it get too close. He then drives Jay home and drops her off in front of her house, leaving her traumatized and confused. Jay's friends, her sister Kelly, her neighbor Greg, and her childhood friend Paul, are concerned when they find her in shock. Jay tries to explain what happened, but they are skeptical until they begin witnessing the strange occurrences themselves. At school, Jay sees the entity for the first time in the form of an elderly woman in a hospital gown, slowly walking towards her across the campus. Jay panics and flees, confirming that the curse is real. Determined to escape the entity, Jay and her friends track down Hugh, whose real name is revealed to be Jeff Redman. Jeff explains that he received the curse after a one-night stand and passed it to Jay in a desperate attempt to save himself. He advises Jay to pass the curse on to someone else as quickly as possible, though he acknowledges that doing so is morally questionable. As the entity continues to pursue Jay, it takes on increasingly disturbing forms, including a tall, disfigured man, a girl with missing teeth, and even one of her friends. Jay's sense of security is shattered, as she realizes that she cannot trust anyone around her. She and her friends decide to flee to Greg's family's lake house in an attempt to buy time and figure out a solution. At the lake house, the entity attacks Jay, taking the form of a young boy from their neighborhood. In a panic, Jay drives away in Greg's car, only to crash into a cornfield. She wakes up in a hospital, where Greg, who doesn't believe in the curse, has sex with her, intending to take on the entity himself. However, the entity soon catches up to Greg, taking the form of his mother and killing him in his home. After Greg's death, Jay becomes increasingly desperate. Her friends suggest a plan to lure the entity into a swimming pool and electrocute it. They return to an indoor public pool and set up various electrical appliances around the edge, hoping to lure the entity into the water. However, the plan goes awry when the entity, appearing as Jay's father, begins hurling the appliances at her instead. Jay's friends try to protect her, but they are unable to see the entity, leading to a chaotic and dangerous situation. In the end, Jay shoots the entity in the head, causing it to sink into the pool. The water turns red with blood, suggesting that the entity may be dead, but there's no certainty. In the final scenes, Jay and Paul, who has always had feelings for her, decide to have sex, hoping to share the burden of the curse. The film ends ambiguously, with Jay and Paul walking hand in hand down a street, while a figure in the background slowly follows them. It's left unclear whether the figure is the entity or just a person, leaving the audience with a lingering sense of unease. And with that, the film ends. Hello everyone, welcome back! To those who stayed, I hope you enjoyed what you heard enough to give it a watch. It's such an interesting premise, and the way it uses what technically brings humans together and flips it into such a terrifying ordeal is why it's one of my favorite movies out there. I love a good switcheroo. Now, what other reasons are there, you may be wondering? What makes It Follows stand out? Well, like I just mentioned, It Follows has a highly original concept that reinvents the idea of a curse. The slow, relentless nature of the entity is a departure from the fast-paced, jump-scare-heavy approach common in modern horror films. The curse is also uniquely tied to sexual intimacy, which adds layers of psychological complexity and social commentary. Metaphorical depth. The film is rich in symbolism and can be interpreted in multiple ways. The curse can be seen as a metaphor for sexually transmitted infections, the fear of intimacy, or the inevitable approach of death. It also touches on the anxieties of adolescence, the loss of innocence, and the burden of guilt and responsibility. Atmosphere and cinematography. It Follows is visually striking, with cinematography by Mike Gialakis that emphasizes wide, open spaces and long takes, which only helps to heighten the tension. The film often uses 360-degree pans, creating a sense of constant surveillance, as if the entity could be coming from anywhere. The suburban setting, with its decaying houses and empty streets, adds to the feeling of isolation and dread. Minimalist score. The haunting, synth-heavy score by Disaster Piece is a key element of the film's atmosphere. The music is reminiscent of classic horror scores from the 1970s and 80s, particularly those by John Carpenter, but with a modern twist. The score's pulsating rhythms and eerie melodies contribute to the film's unsettling mood and relentless tension. Subtle horror. Rather than relying on jump scares or gore, It Follows builds its horror through a sense of inevitability and dread. The entity's slow, methodical approach creates a constant underlying tension that never lets up. This slow burn approach allows the horror to seep into the viewer's mind, making it all the more effective and lingering. Timeless quality. The film's setting is deliberately ambiguous, blending elements from different eras. The characters' clothing, the cars, the lack of modern technology, and the retro-styled electronics give the film a timeless, dreamlike quality. This lack of specificity makes the story feel universal and relatable, as if it could take place at any point in time. Ambiguity and interpretation. It Follows leaves much open to interpretation, particularly its ending. The film never fully explains the nature of the entity, its origins, or how it can be defeated. This ambiguity forces the audience to fill in the gaps with their imagination, making the horror feel more personal and pervasive. Strong female protagonist. Jay is a compelling and sympathetic protagonist. Her fear and desperation are palpable, but she also shows resilience and determination in trying to survive. The film subverts some horror tropes by portraying Jay as both a victim and a fighter, rather than the helpless damsel. Social commentary. The film can be read as a commentary on the consequences of casual sex in a society that often stigmatizes it, particularly for young women. It also explores themes of trust, betrayal, and the psychological impact of trauma. These deeper themes elevate It Follows above typical horror fare, making it a thought-provoking as well as terrifying experience. It Follows stands out in the horror genre for its originality, atmospheric tension, and rich symbolism. Its unique premise, combined with its minimalist approach to horror and its unsettling ambiguity, makes it a memorable and influential film that has left a lasting impact on modern horror cinema. That's all for It Follows, but I still have 26 more movies that I'll be sharing with you. What do you think they could be? How do you feel about It Follows being on the list? Would it make it onto yours? How do you feel about the unique way that it handles curses? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to discuss horror movies in depth with you all, so feel free to join the Wicked Encounters Discord group. If you like what I do and want to support me, maybe consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and clicking that little bell icon so you know when I post. If you want to support me in other ways, maybe check out my Patreon. Speaking of patrons, I'd like to give a big thank you to mine, Nakala and Beefalump. You guys are simply the best around, and I'm so lucky to have your support. Well, that's all I've got time for today. Until next time, I'm Allie, this is Wicked Encounters, and I'll see you then. Bye!